All right, Dev with Crime Hive. And today we want to talk more about what possible evidence the FBI and Indiana law enforcement agencies may have against the suspect in custody, Richard Allen. To do that, there's some resources that we already have. I'm sure many of you already know the FBI had another suspect, definitely on the radar, a while back with Ronald Logan, and they actually conducted a search of his property. And in that affidavit, that probable cause affidavit, there were some interesting things that we learned about what the FBI already knows about this case. So we're going to talk about that and a few more things about Richard Allen. There was a recent article that came out that I'm going to show you in which there was an alleged domestic violence incident with his wife back in 2015. So I'll pull that article up here. Okay, and this article was from Fox 59. And this was back in June 18th, 2015, and Richard Allen was apparently drunk. So I want to mention that because there seems to be a theme with him over the years. He's been at this bar, he's a local patron there. Seems like alcohol seems to be in his life, and that may be one of the factors in this case. Was he drunk? Was he drinking before he went potentially to that crime scene? Still keep in mind he's a suspect right now. We still don't know a lot of information, but was he drinking alcohol? Did he leave that bar? So in this case, his wife actually took him to the hospital for a medical evaluation. So that also warrants the question, how is his mental health? What was going on with him? Maybe his family, maybe some family members can give us more insight on what was actually going on inside the home. Because again, neighbors, friends, other people just seemed like he had this good life and he was just this nice man. But of course, we know there's much more to this story. So that's something that I want to keep an eye on. Now, I want to provide a list there was a list on Reddit here. Just basic things to keep an eye on, indicators of the suspect profile. And these are pretty general, but things to think about, back on Monday, February 13th, the suspect, did he have an interaction with any individual who, he may have canceled an appointment or called into work sick or canceled some other appointment during that time? So if anyone has any information about that, thinking back, did he or this person, did they change their appearance, right? Did they all of a sudden after that incident had the color of their hair changed, different beard, length of hair, appearance? Did they change the way they dress? Did their behavior change? Did their sleep patterns change? With drugs and alcohol, did that change after this incident? So there's a lot of things to think about, right? Have they become more anxious, nervous, irritable? Did they seem to have a really infatuation with this case, constantly talking about it with other people and asking other people about what they might know about the case, things like that. So an FBI profile was put out on February of 2017. But what I really want to talk about is what some of the evidence they potentially have already that may be linked to this suspect, Richard Allen. So I'm going to pull that affidavit up real quick here. Okay, so here's a previous probable cause affidavit, and this was from a special agent from the FBI, and it's interesting what's in here because we learn a few things. One, this suspect, Ronald Logan, part of the reason he was a suspect is he seemed to kind of fit the build of the person on the photo that was taken by the victims, right? You got Liberty and Abby. They had that Snapchat. You got the video, the photo. He matched that general description. But what kind of drew investigators in is they were found on the property owned by him. I mean, it was only 1,400 feet from his residence, okay? So they have a very keen interest in Ronald at this time. This is earlier on in the investigation. But here's some interesting things, okay? Their wounds were caused by a weapon, okay? We know that there was a large amount of blood that was lost by the victims on this crime scene. In here, they go on to talk about it was discovered that there were some articles of clothing from one of the victims missing from the crime scene. while the rest of the clothing was recovered. Okay, so that's really interesting. What is that piece of clothing? Okay, is it possible that police have found that article of clothing, or is it linked to Richard in this case? Okay, the girls' bodies were apparently moved and staged. Okay, then they go on to talk about how it's common for a perpetrator to take a souvenir. Okay, such whether it's photos or other, whether it's an article of clothing, like I just mentioned earlier. So you got to wonder, was there some sort of digital evidence also found with the suspect in this case? Okay. There apparently was no visible signs of a struggle or fight from the victims. Okay. They're continuing on in the affidavit. These are really interesting here. Okay. You've got, when they're processing the crime, there were unknown fibers and unidentified hairs. Okay. That could be used for comparison. So at this stage, you got to wonder if they've already made that comparison. We're talking about some pretty hard evidence here. Again, if they're going to make an arrest on somebody, what might that evidence be? Well, it could be a fiber, it could be a hair. We know that they possibly had DNA from that scene. Okay. And then, of course, it talks about some other things. I'm going to skip around here, but Logan kind of fit this mold of a suspect at the time because he had guns and knives and interviewing other people, his family and friends. He had a violent tendency. He'd abused and he had a temper. There was a lot of things that they documented in this here. But let me see if I can point out some other interesting aspects of this case here. Okay, so again, Logan was a suspect because it was strange because he was deceptive with law enforcement. He happened to be in the area of the crime when it occurred, and he just seemed to give false information about his activities that day. Having people to corroborate an alibi for him, just really strange behavior that was all documented in this affidavit. So that ended up leading to a search warrant on his property, right? And so these are some of the things that the FBI would be looking for, especially with Richard Allen, since they're going to be searching all of his personal belongings, his home, all of that as well. So these are some of the things that they're going to be looking for, which I'll point out. So the way this document is worded, it basically gives them all access to the property. I mean, to look for the most minute detail, right? Any and all evidence pertaining to a murder, including clothing, forensic evidence, blood scene, right? Unseen hair, bodily fluids, seen and unseen fibers, okay, weapons, including guns and cutting instruments, electronic devices, produced with cellular signal, any type of computer or computer equipment. So we're talking about, a very thorough, full search here, whether it's cartridges, software, disks, flash drives, you name it. Okay, they're putting that in this affidavit. Digital cameras. They went looking for everything, right? Even records, documentation, anything written down, anything on a tablet, an iPhone. So those are the types of things that they're looking for. So just, again, thinking about that perspective with Richard Allen, we're going to learn a lot more. And eventually that document will be unsealed with why he was arrested and what evidence they actually have. If you guys know any other bits of information, any other potential evidence that was discovered, or any other articles, there's so many of them floating around out there right now. But I'll just continue to kind of create videos with a certain segment of this case and this topic. If you guys have any ideas on what to do other videos on related to this case, let me know in the comments below. And we'll see you guys soon. Chat with you soon.